Welcome back in our series about Storyist for macOS and iOS. So in this video, speaking of iOS, this is what this video is all about. I'm going to use Storyist on my tiny little iPhone 5S, which has seen better days. Well, not has seen better days. It's vintage 2013, so it's now 5 years old, but it's still running iOS 11, and I believe it's even going to run iOS 12. And of course, at the very front here, I have Storyist on here. So let's have a look what that looks like on iOS. When I open it, I get to see all the documents that are currently associated with the folder in which I'm storing documents. I highly recommend you don't store documents on the phone, but you store them in the cloud so that they can sync up with the desktop version of Storyist. So although most of the features have been ported to Storyist for iOS over time, it is still meant to be a kind of cut down version of it. So it doesn't allow you to create ebooks with it, for example. It doesn't have all the export options that the desktop version has. So it's just something to keep in mind. So I see this very much as an addition to the full version of Storyist for Mac, and that's where most of the work gets done. But you can indeed take your iPad or your iPhone and grab a separate keyboard with it and connect that via Bluetooth to your phone, and then do a writing session in the coffee shop without a laptop, or just with your mobile phone. And it's great for correction. So this is what I'm using it for as well. If I either read something like my latest draft on an e-reader, like my good old-fashioned Kindle keyboard over here, I can sit in the park and read that, and when I find something, I can go and make that correction without having to have any other hardware with me. So that's what that's really good for. So this currently is this represents all the files that are in the cloud folder that I'm using, and I believe I can have a look at that under Edit, and this is something where I can now pick a document and then either duplicate it or delete it, or with a little umbrella thing up here I can see what versions have been saved with that document. So we've talked about versions before. This little guy here, this is a duplicate button. This guy would mean share this document with somebody else, and of course the trash can icon means get rid of it altogether. So in this case, perhaps I can do that. Let me just delete that. Delete selected item. There we go. Screencast 2 is now gone. I believe Storyist screencast, those are kind of notes that I've made for this very screencast, so I can have a quick look in that. If I tap it, then it opens, and it has everything that I want to talk about. So here, everything with an X is the stuff that we've already done, and then everything without an X is not done. So I believe we've done the dark interface. You just park your cursor there and you start typing if you're so inclined, and I believe we've also talked about writing goals. So this one is now Stories for iOS, so I'm going to put an X in front of that as well. So creating ebooks and creating PDFs is coming up next. If you're done typing, you can of course double click a word and then select this icon here, the AA icon. If you do that, then you get some of the formatting options. So if I wanted to write that in bold, I can do that, or I can untick bold and tick the I for italics, or then U for underline. And you have several options for the spacing options, the list options, and what type of style you want to apply here. So you have all that at your disposal. When you're done messing with any of these things, you can click that little triangle here, and then that'll turn back into a keyboard. Now, sometimes it's really difficult to find the right spot in the iOS document. So usually you take your finger and you hold it on here, and then you should get this little magnifying glass here, and that usually allows you to position the cursor, but sometimes it's just very pernickety with where the cursor goes. So sometimes you're not going to be successful with that. I'm going to be honest with you. But the good thing is there is an option of doing it, and that is this little guy here, the two arrows with a bar in the middle. And if you tap that, then you get a virtual kind of keyboard here. And with that, those are now representative of the cursor keys that you know and love from your keyboard, and you can position your cursor with that. So go further left, go further right, or go up and go down. You can do that for characters, for individual characters here, or for words, or for whole paragraphs. So that makes navigating the whole document a lot easier. And there is I don't know if you know this, it's been in for iOS for ages. If you shake your device vigorously, it usually comes up with an undo dialog. But although that kind of served its purpose, it really isn't what we do with iOS anymore. So that's why Steve's also added the undo button here, with which you can undo certain steps. So that's also good to keep in mind. If you want to switch back to the keyboard, that's what that does here, the little keyboard thing. And now you can keep typing again. And it comes up with word suggestions here and all that. If you want to go back one step, then you have to click this little guy in the bottom here, which will make the keyboard disappear, and that makes you go kind of into reading mode. So this is what my document currently looks like. Notice that I don't see any page formatting. So by default, what's happening on iOS is that the draft mode is enabled by default, but you can disable that and look at the whole page that's formatted. And you do that by clicking this little guy here, the kind of the wrench icon. When you do that, you get to the settings of the current project, some of them, and there's things like spelling that you can explore, switch on and off. So that's very interesting that is exposed, because usually that's not how iOS works. You have to go into the settings app and then either switch on or off auto correction, and Storyist overrides that. It's very, very good, very handy tip to have. But the thing that we're interested in is currently in the view section here, just like it is on the desktop application. So click on that and you can see that draft mode is enabled. So if I disable that, there we go, and I click done, then I can see that this is how my page is currently formatted. And there's only one page, so I can't really scroll up and down, but I can zoom in and out with gestures, so I can do that and then have a bigger look, and I can even position the cursor and keep typing in that mode if I'm so inclined. And then of course I want to switch draft mode back on, then it's this little thing in the middle again, hit that wrench icon under view, switch on draft mode. And that's that. Under view also, this is another thing that I find interesting sometimes to look at. It's the document info, and that gives you an idea about the current word goal and how many pages your document has. And it's just something nice to look at. And if you're ever interested in that and you're on the go, this is where to find it. Now let me go and go back to the document chooser view that's down here, and one step further back will get me into this. And notice that little cloud icon that appears, followed by that little arrow icon here. So what Storyist does there in the background is that little cloud icon that we saw here a minute ago. That means it zips up the whole document. That takes a little bit of time. And then that little arrow means it is currently uploading the document to the cloud. So that's something to keep in mind. As soon as that arrow is gone, the document has populated to the cloud and is now available on the other computers. Well, at least it's available in the cloud, and as soon as the other computers download it, then it's available to, for further faffing around on other devices. Sometimes synchronization inconsistencies can happen, and that's usually down to one document being open, having changes not having been populated into the cloud, while the same document is also open on another computer. So that's kind of a mistake that can happen. To avoid that, Storyist will never discard any of your changes. It will just flag up, hey, this document has a version inconsistency. Which version would you like to keep? Which version would you like to open? And then at that point, you can either save both versions and worry about it later, or you can discard one version and keep working with another. But to avoid such inconsistencies altogether, what you can do is make absolutely sure before you open your same document on another device, make sure you've closed it on this device. So if you see this dialog here, or this thing, then that means all the documents are currently closed. Whereas when you see something like this, that means your document is potentially not closed. Or if you see something like that, your document is not closed, has not saved, and has not populated to the cloud yet. So do yourself the favor, avoid all these inconsistencies by making sure once you've done with an edit, just go back to this screen, and then you don't have those types of problems. Let's quickly talk about this one. I think the screencast document, that's the one that I've shown you on the computer, I've got exactly the same as before. I've got, when we're talking about writing goals, I've made that folder, and I've got these 2 extra documents in here, and this is my test manuscript with the 3 chapters. If we open that, we should see them chapter 1 and a lot of lorem text, and then somewhere further down we have chapter 2 and so forth. Let me show you how to insert new chapters and new sections into chapters, just so that we're on the same page here. So if I scroll to the very bottom of my document and I just hit return a couple of times, and I'll just call this one here chapter 4, and I hit return just like on the desktop version, then this would be chapter 4. There. If I wanted to dedicate this chapter 4, again, I park my cursor somewhere in that word or at the beginning of the line, it doesn't really matter. And then I can tap this AA icon here, which gets us into the kind of font formatting. And on the last tab here where it says style, this is where now all my styles will appear. So I can now make this a chapter title. And as soon as I do that, it seemingly disappears again, but that's exactly like the desktop version works. So as soon as I scroll further down, there's my chapter, and this is now this would be chapter 4. And the same happens for sections. So if I wanted to, this is kind of section 1 up here, and then if I wanted to place this hash mark again, it works exactly the same way. I go to the AA thing again, and under style I select section separator, which will put my cursor into the middle, and then all I have to do is actually type that section separator, which again with a little arrow icon it goes back to this, and the hash mark is hidden under the 1, 2, 3 key, and then under the hash plus equals key, and that's my hash mark here. Hit return. Next section begins here. Full stop. Excellent. You can also use the dictation feature with this. So if you have large passages to type, you could use that. The quick grey fox jumps over the lazy dog. Full stop. And then you just hit that little icon, and then you go back into there. So that is the power of iOS, allows you to just type without actually typing. So it's very exciting. But I think it's most useful either with an attached keyboard, with a full-sized keyboard, the Mac keyboard, or any other Bluetooth keyboard, or in fact for corrections while you're reading something. Yes, let's have a look for a section in here. So again, click this little icon here. Go into full screen mode, and then you can see that little search icon. As soon as you tap on that, there we go, then you can type in what you're looking for. So in my case, perhaps I'm looking for fox, or no, in fact, let me look for lorem and see how many times lorem ipsum is happening here. Click that little search button and it'll tell you where lorem is. There we go, it highlights it here. And you have these 2 buttons with which you go further and back. So the next time lorem appears here, and the next time it appears here, and so forth. If you want to correct one of them, you can just tap into the text. That means you get out of edit mode. Or you can also click the little done button at the top next to the search bar, and then you can correct that word if you're so inclined. Or you can also perform substitutions by going back to your search icon and then opening that little disclosure triangle here. And that will now allow you to replace lorem with something else. So lorem, I don't know, lorem ipsum. There we go. And if you do that, you would now click search at the bottom. That will show you the next iteration of that, and that will now allow you to replace this one iteration. So if I hit that, then out of a sudden lorem has been replaced with lorem ipsum. And now of course it says lorem ipsum ipsum, which is also not what we want. So, but it demonstrates the principle. One thing we haven't shown yet, I'm going to just click the done button here to get out of that mode, is where are these little sections and where can I move them around? Where's the outline of that? So there's 2 ways of doing it. One is this button down here, and when you click that, you get not the outline view, but you get the index card view. And the index cards here work just like the same as above. You hold one down and then you move it into another position. And look, all the color coding that we've applied on the desktop version is still applicable here. So it's very exciting. But the other view is also available, and that is this little button down here. So if I switch back, first of all I'm going to switch back to my draft view over here, and then I'm going to click this guy down here, and that now shows me the whole the whole document tree. Inside my document, this is currently that folder I've made, but inside that document here we have the chapter and subchapter and section set up, and that means I'm supposed to click on this guy here. And as soon as I do that, then I basically get another, this is called a table view, I believe, in iOS. So you see this whole thing. You can use these little disclosure triangles to close whole sections down. Notice one thing, that you can indeed change the descriptions of these things. So I can just tap into here. Whoops, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean to do that. Jesus, I didn't mean to do that. So I'm going to hold on to this, and then I can just type something else into here, like say demo section, and I hit done, but I can't actually move these things around. I may be able to do with edit. Yes, actually I have to do with edit. There we go. And if you do that, then this table view becomes editable. And now that means that these little things I can use and move the whole thing around. So if I'm going to move the demo section between Dave in the office and the coffee shop section, I can do that. And you can just about make out that the text on the right hand side has changed for that. Depending on a larger screen, you'll probably be able to see this better. Or on the iPad, for example. It's very exciting to see that on the iPad. And you can also delete things from here, and as soon as you hit done, then that's kind of done. There's one other thing, and all table views on iOS have that in common. If you hit that edit button again, you now have that plus button. So if you do that, then you can add a section, a chapter, or a subheading, depending on what you have defined. So subheading, that's another additional outline level that we've defined earlier, and by default I believe you were going to have the section and the chapter. So depending on how you want to work, you can either go into the text and place a hash mark for a section, or type something like a chapter heading and then format it as such, or you can use this way of adding things into your manuscript, and therefore just make a quick note on the go. And I think that's all I have to say about Storyist for iOS at this point. Let me just go back into the whole project main view here, and then you can see that little cloud icon followed by that little arrow icon. And once that is done, this should now all be synced onto my desktop and ready for the pickup there. Yeah, so that's all I can say about the iOS version of Storyist. I do recommend you get it if you have a Mac and you have an iPhone, which I'm sure you do. Then this is a perfect accompaniment, and it has helped me out greatly to just to be more creative, because it allows you to literally be out and about anywhere, and you go, oh, that would be so good, this one sentence would be so good. Just put it down. Don't put it on the notes application or on the reminders application or some other application. Leave it all in a single application. It really makes your life so much easier, and it's one of those things you can never predict where creativity strikes. So I can only say praise for Storyist for iOS if it's used in conjunction with Storyist for Mac. I hope you liked this video. In the next one, we're going to discuss how we're going to export ebooks and PDFs. That's going to be a couple of videos there. If you like this video, please share it with friends, families, and total strangers. And don't forget to subscribe to my channel. I will see you next time. Take care. Bye-bye.